in a village where beauty was both a blessing and a curse. One orphan girl's fate was sealed by cruelty, envy, and a heartbreaking betrayal. Abandoned at birth and raised without love by a cold-hearted woman, Anita spent her life serving others in silence. When she blossomed into a striking young woman, her beauty sparked jealousy so deep it led to an unthinkable punishment, being forced to marry the village's most despised outcast. But beneath his broken appearance lay a hidden truth that would challenge everything. This is a story of pain, injustice, and the quiet strength that refuses to die. It was just before dawn when the first cry pierced the silence of the village. A wailing so small and fragile, carried by the wind, reaching only the ears of the curious crows, and one woman who had risen early to stoke her fire. Mama Fatima, known across the village for her sharp tongue and colder heart, opened her wooden door and squinted into the weak morning light. There, wrapped in a thin blanket, lay a baby girl, no name, no note, just the soft, hiccuping sobs of a child too new to understand. She had already been abandoned. Fatima's lips twisted into a frown. She was not a woman easily moved by pity, but even she knew how tongues wagged in this village, how quickly rumours bloomed into truths. Taking the baby in would earn her praise, at least for a while. And so she scooped the child up with as much care as one might lift a bundle of old cloth. "Anita," she said with a scoff, as though the name were a joke, "you will earn your keep." And so Anita became the invisible girl of the house. As the years rolled by, Anita lived in the shadow of Mama Fatima's two daughters, Amara the eldest, with her honey-slick voice and eyes like sharpened almonds, and Chimmy, the younger, with laughter that rang out like silver bells. The house rang with music, food and colour, none of which Anita was allowed to enjoy. While Amara and Chimmy wore silks and played with dolls from the city, Anita scrubbed the floors until her hands cracked and bled. She learned to be silent, to be quick to disappear. When laughter filled the rooms, Mama Fatima, a woman once praised for her supposed charity, never missed an opportunity to remind Anita of her place. "You are lucky I took you in," she would spit, eyes narrowed like knives. "You could have died in the cold. This is your home, but not your family." Anita listened. She always listened. But even a flower blooming in darkness will find a way to grow. By the time Anita was 16, she had grown into a beauty that seemed almost unfair. Her skin shimmered like polished bronze under the sun. Her eyes were deep pools of quiet fire, and her smile, though rarely seen, was something that made strangers pause. The villagers began to notice boys who once ignored her, now lingered by the house with invented errands. Mothers whispered behind fans and baskets, casting glances laced with warning. And Mama Fatima, who had always seen Anita as beneath her daughters, now saw her as something worse, a rival. It festered, this envy. It crept into her like rot under a floorboard. Every compliment Anita received became a lash against Fatima's pride. Every time someone compared her daughters to Anita, she clenched her fist tighter. Her daughters, though lovely, could not match Anita's raw, effortless grace. No matter how expensive the dresses, or how heavy the gold they wore, next to Anita they faded, and Mama Fatima would not allow her daughters to be outshined, not by a servant, and certainly not by a girl who wasn't even her blood. One night, under a moon so full it looked like it might spill from the sky, Mama Fatima sat in her kitchen stirring a pot of bitter herbs and cruel intentions. She had heard whispers about a man named David, crippled, scarred and shunned by most. He lived on the edge of the village, a figure children were warned about and women pitied from afar. No one knew how he survived, but they all agreed on one thing: David was cursed. He would be perfect. The next morning, Fatima called Anita into the parlour. The girl's hands were dusted with flour, her hair tied in a neat braid. She looked, as always, like someone who did not yet know she was beautiful. "You're getting married, Mama," Fatima said with a smile that did not reach her eyes. Anita blinked. "Married to whom?" "To David," she said, watching the color drain from the girl's face. "He's kind enough to take someone like you. We should all be grateful." Anita's knees buckled, but she stood firm. "Please, I don't know him. I don't want this." "Mama," Fatima stepped forward and slapped her so hard the sound echoed through the walls. "You do not get to want," she snarled. "You belong to this house, and now you belong to him." The next days passed like a storm Anita could not escape. No one came to her defense. Amara and Chimmy watched with smug smiles, pleased to be rid of the shadow they could not outshine. The villagers said nothing. They knew better than to interfere with Mama Fatima's business. The wedding was arranged in hushed tones. No celebration, no feast, no joy. Just a gathering of a few onlookers who came more out of curiosity than support. Anita stood in a borrowed gown that hung too loose on her small frame. Her eyes were hollow, her hands trembling. David arrived late, leaning on a crooked cane. He was taller than she imagined, with a face half hidden by a long scar, and eyes that held the weariness of someone who had stopped hoping long ago. He did not smile. He barely looked at her, but when their hands met beneath the threadbare veil, something strange passed between them. Not warmth, not comfort, but recognition, as though pain could recognize itself in another. Anita said her vows in a voice barely above a whisper. No one cheered, no one wept. When the ceremony ended, Mama Fatima turned her back without a word. Amara and Chimi were already gossiping with their friends. The villagers melted away, uninterested now that the show was over. David led Anita to a small cart. She climbed in numb. The wheels turned, and the village disappeared behind them like a bad dream. In that moment, Anita knew her life had ended, or so she thought. But this was not the end. It was only the beginning. They came in whispers first, then laughter, then cruelty. The village stirred like a restless animal the morning Mama Fatima pulled Anita from her tiny corner of the house, her grip as tight as iron. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. The fury in her eyes, the bruises from last night still fresh on Anita's skin, told her everything she needed to know. Today was the day she would be discarded. The sun had barely risen, but people were already out, fetching water, feeding chickens, trading stories. And when they saw Anita dragged barefoot through the dust, their eyes lit up with mean curiosity. Women paused at their stalls. Children stopped their games. Even the old men leaning on their walking sticks seemed suddenly more alert. "There goes the slave girl," someone murmured. "She's going to David," another whispered, giggling behind her palm. "To the cripple. Oh God, Fatima is wicked. She deserves it." She thought she was too pretty to scrub floors. Anita's chest tightened. Each word fell on her like stones. Stones she could not throw back. She wanted to scream, to fight, to run, but Mama Fatima's hand was around her wrist like a shackle. They passed by familiar faces. People Anita had once hoped might see her, protect her. Now they turned away, or worse, smiled as if watching entertainment unfold. And then they reached it. David's hut sat on the edge of the village, like a forgotten thought, sagging, crumbling, swallowed by weeds and time. The air smelled faintly of mildew and wood smoke. Its walls leaned like tired shoulders, its roof patched with old tin and prayer. Mama Fatima didn't knock. She shoved the door open and pushed Anita inside, like an animal being sold. David was there, seated on a wooden stool, his crutch leaning against the wall beside him. His face shadowed and quiet, didn't shift as Anita stumbled in, nor did he rise to greet them. He just looked. Mama. Hima spat her words like venom. "This is your wife now. I expect no complaints. She is your burden." David blinked once, then nodded. Anita turned, tears already burning in her eyes, and reached for the door. But Mama Fatima slammed it shut behind her, locking it with a final thud. Her footsteps faded, but her cruelty lingered in the stale air. Anita stood frozen, shaking, chest heaving with helpless rage. She looked at David. This man she'd never spoken to, this stranger wrapped in silence, and her legs gave out beneath her. She sank to the floor and wept. She wept like she had never wept before. Not even in Mama Fatima's kitchen, scrubbing soot with bleeding hands. Not even when she'd watched Amara steal the only dress she'd ever liked. Not even when she'd been slapped for smiling too brightly. Nothing had prepared her for this final betrayal. She was 18, trapped, married to a man the village called cursed. David didn't say a word. He didn't try to comfort her. But as the sun dipped below the horizon and the shadows grew long, he rose slowly from his stool and disappeared into a back corner. When he returned, he held a faded wool blanket in his hands. Without a word, he draped it over her shoulders, then returned to his stool and stared into the night. It was a simple gesture, but to Anita in that moment, it was the only softness she had felt in years. Days passed heavy and slow. The gossip outside grew louder before it quieted. In the beginning, villagers came by just to stare, to laugh, to taunt. She must cry herself to sleep every night. David doesn't even talk. He's cursed. A demon probably twisted his spine. She deserves it. She thought she was better than us. Anita stayed inside. She swept the floors, boiled water, made meals in silence. David never asked for anything. He only ate what she placed before him and spent most of his time outside, carving wood with shaky fingers, eyes locked on the horizon. He was not like other men. He didn't stare at her with hunger. He didn't touch her. He didn't boast or shout or strike. He simply existed. Anita began to watch him too. She noticed the way he struggled to rise each morning, the quiet hiss of pain that escaped his lips as he leaned on his crutch. She saw how his hands trembled, not from weakness, but from years of solitude. She noticed how his eyes, dark and still held stories he would never tell. One evening, as the sky bruised purple and the wind turned cool, Anita found herself sitting beside him on the porch. Neither spoke, but silence, she realized, was no longer unbearable between them. He handed her a small wooden carving, clumsy but delicate, a bird with outstretched wings. She blinked, surprised. "For you," he said quietly, his voice rough with disuse. It was the first time he had spoken. Anita looked at the bird in her palm, a gift, not out of duty, not out of guilt, but something gentler. "A bridge, thank you," she whispered. Nights grew colder. David began lighting a fire in the hearth, making sure it burned through the night. When she coughed one morning, he left and returned hours later with herbs from the hills. When her fingers cracked from washing, he handed her a tin of balm, always wordless, always humble. The village forgot about them soon enough. There were new things to gossip about. Amara's new admirer, the chief's lazy son, the upcoming festival. But inside the broken hut, something fragile was being born. Not love, not yet, but something like understanding. Anita still missed the life she'd never had. She still dreamed of running far, far away, but she no longer woke up crying. She no longer felt like prey. David, in all his silence and awkwardness, gave her space to breathe. One night, she asked the question that had been clawing at her throat for weeks. "Why did you say yes?" David didn't look at her. "Because I knew what she was doing to you." Anita's breath caught. "She thought giving you to me would ruin you," he continued. "But I thought maybe I could give you a place to rest, even if just for a while." Tears burned her eyes again, but these were different. Not from pain, but from the aching kindness she hadn't known how much she needed. "Everyone says you're cursed," she whispered. "I am," he said simply, "but I'm not cruel." Time passed. Anita began to hum when she swept the floors. David began carving more animals, foxes, turtles, elephants, and gave them all to her. They spoke more now, though never about the past. Some pain didn't need to be relived to be understood. One day, Mama Fatima came to the hut. She looked at Anita with cold satisfaction, expecting to see a wreck. A girl broken, bitter, defeated. But Anita stood tall, hands firm on her hips, eyes steady. "I see you've adjusted," Mama Fatima said, lips curled. Anita didn't flinch. "You didn't break me." Mama Fatima's smile faded. She turned and walked away. David, who had watched from the doorway, said nothing, but when Anita turned to him, he nodded once, and she knew he was proud. They still laughed. The villagers had forgotten many things over the years, the passing of seasons, the names of old gods, even the songs of their grandmothers. But one thing they never tired of was the humiliation of others. And Anita, the abandoned girl turned servant, turned unwanted bride, remained their favorite spectacle. "Look at her," they said as she passed, living with that crippled ghost in that shack. "Poor thing," or maybe not so poor, maybe she likes it. Maybe she cursed him herself. A witch, just like her mother. Anita heard every word. The village didn't whisper when they talked about her anymore. They didn't need to. She had no family to defend her, no friends to stand beside her, no place to hide. But what they didn't know, what even she barely understood yet, was that something inside her had begun to stir. It started on a quiet morning. She'd gone to fetch water from the well, alone, as always. But as she drew the bucket, two boys snuck behind her and yanked it from her hands. Water spilled over her feet, soaking her only pair of shoes. The boys howled with laughter and ran. She was about to chase after them. Instinct, not courage, but stopped when she saw them run headlong into David. He wasn't standing tall. He never could. But the moment they saw him, something about his silence turned their laughter brittle. One boy mumbled an apology and both darted away like cowards. Anita walked up to him, shivering, ashamed. "They always do that," she muttered. David didn't respond. He just looked down at the spilled bucket, then back at her, quiet, steady. That's when something snapped. Not with rage, not with despair, but with clarity. The next time a group of women giggled behind her back in the market, Anita turned and stared them down. They laughed louder at first, but when she didn't flinch, their voices faltered. For the first time, Anita saw something flicker in their eyes. Hesitation, power didn't come in a roar. Sometimes it came in silence, bone deep and rising slowly like a fire, learning how to burn. But defiance didn't feed an empty stomach. Weeks had passed since the wedding. The little food David had stored was gone, and the chickens outside the hut had stopped laying eggs. Hunger gnawed at Anita's belly like a wild animal. David was too proud to beg, too ashamed perhaps. He'd gone days with nothing but water. His lips were cracked. His hands trembled more. So Anita made a choice. The one place that might still offer food was the last place she wanted to return, Mama Fatima's house. She stood outside the gate for a long time, her stomach growling, the memories clawing at her. The kitchen where she had scrubbed floors until her knuckles bled. The chair where Mama Fatima had sat, barking orders with a wooden spoon in hand. The table where Amara and Chimi had eaten until they were full, laughing while Anita scraped bones for herself. But hunger has no pride, and Anita had learned to bury shame long ago. She knocked once, twice the door opened. Amara stood there, draped in fine fabric and surrounded by the smell of roasted meat. Her lips curled when she saw Anita. Well, look who's crawling back. "I need food," Anita said. Her voice was steady but quiet. "Just something to eat for David too." Chimmy appeared beside her sister. "You mean the beggar, the cripple? You're both starving." They laughed, the way wolves laugh before they tear into flesh. Mama Fatima called from inside. "Who is it?" Amara called back, eyes gleaming. "Our little stray. She wants scraps." Mama Fatima appeared in the doorway, a bowl in her hands. Steam rose from it, soup thick and rich. For one moment, just one, Anita hoped. But it was a trick. With one swift motion, Mama Fatima hurled the soup at her. It splashed over Anita's chest and face, hot and wet, staining her dress and scalding her skin. The bowl clattered to the ground. Laughter exploded from the doorway. Even the neighbors turned to watch. She begs and gets a bath instead. She should be grateful. She's cleaner now. Anita stood frozen, soup dripping from her chin, her eyes stinging. Humiliation rose like fire in her throat. And then, through the crowd, through the laughter, came a voice. "Anita." She turned. David was there, leaning heavily on his crutch chest, heaving from the walk, eyes locked on hers. The crowd stilled. He limped forward, the click of his wooden crutch striking the earth with every step. He reached her, looked at her soaked dress, her trembling hands, her burning cheeks. And then, without a word, he took off his shawl and draped it over her shoulders. She felt her knees threaten to give, but he steadied her with one hand. Then turning to the crowd, he spoke. Only a few words, but they cut through the air like a blade. "She's worth more than all of you combined." The crowd gasped. No one moved. No one spoke. David looked at Mama Fatima, his gaze sharp as glass. "You never broke her," he said, "but you revealed yourself." Then turning gently, he took Anita's hand and walked her through the crowd. Heads turned, eyes dropped. Not one dared to laugh now. At the edge of the road, Mama Fatima shouted after them, "You're no daughter of mine." Anita stopped walking. She didn't look back, didn't flinch. Just stood there in silence, the shawl slipping slightly off her shoulders. Then finally she spoke. "I know." They didn't talk much on the way back. David limped in silence. Anita walked beside him, still trembling, but no longer with fear. Something had changed in her, something deep, something ancient. Mama Fatima had disowned her, and it felt like freedom. She looked at David, this quiet man who had stood before a crowd not to shame her, but to shield her. A man mocked by everyone, yet who had more dignity than all of them combined. At the hut, David lit a fire and sat quietly. Anita went to the back, took off her stained dress and scrubbed it in cold water. Her hands were red by the time she was done. She hung it to dry and wrapped herself in a faded cloth. Then she sat beside the fire and stared into the flames. "You didn't have to come," she said. David didn't answer right away. Then he said, "I told you, you're not alone anymore." Anita turned to him, and for the first time she smiled. Not a forced smile, not a smile to survive, but something real. Something rising from the ashes. That night, sleep came easily. Anita dreamed of birds with golden wings, flying far above the village. In the dream, one of them turned into her, and she soared higher and higher, the sky opening before her like a door. She woke before dawn. David was still asleep, wrapped in a thin blanket, his hand resting on one of the wooden carvings. Anita walked outside. The wind was cold, but the horizon was painted with the faint promise of morning. She stood there for a long time, watching the sun rise. And though her belly still ached, though her past still clung to her like shadows, something inside her pulsed with life. It was not hope, not yet, but it was the beginning of something braver, the beginning of strength, the beginning of her. That night, as the wind rustled the dry leaves and stars blinked above the crumbling roof, Anita lay awake, staring at the bird carving beside her bed. She was still angry at the world. She still longed for freedom, but in the deepest part of her soul, something had shifted. She no longer felt alone, and though she had not chosen this path, and though her heart still ached for the life stolen from her, she was beginning to believe that perhaps, even in a place of exile, something like healing could begin. Thank you so much for watching and staying with us through Anita's powerful journey. From pain to strength, from silence to awakening, her story is one of courage, resilience, and the quiet fire that lives within those the world tries to forget. If this story moved you, inspired you, or made you reflect in any way, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss future episodes filled with emotion, truth, and transformation. We'd also love to hear from you. Drop a comment below and share your thoughts about Anita's journey. What touched you the most? What do you think will happen next? Your voice matters, and your support means the world to us. Until next time, stay strong, stay kind, and keep believing in second chances.